Die roll, generally pretty important in matchups like this, where Infect is one of the two decks. Hollow One, of course, trying to get out of the gates pretty quickly as well. The card Hollow One gets a little bit worse the longer the game goes.
Absolutely. Hollow One is particularly good on turns 1 and 2, especially when backed up by a secondary threat, whether that's Flameblade Adapt or something like Gurmag Angler or even Flamewake Phoenix. Just that amount of pressure early is usually enough to get the job done, as long as you have a little bit of something else to go along with it.
So we'll get down to the match. Looks like Tom Ross did win the die roll. He'll start us off with an Inkmoth Nexus.
Don't love that start. Usually want to lead off with a Noble Hierarch on turn 1 or a Glistener Elf. Inkmoth Nexus signifies one of two things to me. Either that is Tom Ross's only Infect creature, and he plans to attack with it next turn, or he has a Blighted Agent and just wants to have 2 Infect threats on the battlefield next turn.
Gaieski's side, pretty clear. You generally know what Tom Ross is up to, certainly this deep in a tournament. He'll start by cycling a Street Wraith and then crack Bloodstained Mire for basic Mountain. Here's a Faithless Looting. This means if he has any hollow ones, they're already free. Look at 2 cards here. There is a hollow one hanging out somewhere there. Ooh, and double Bloodcast is the discard, followed by a hollow one.
Yeah, and of course, cycling the Street Wraith plus the Faithless Looting is 3 cards for this hollow one to get into play quickly, as well as these 2 Bloodghast looming from the graveyard that could come back next turn with just a simple land drop.
For Tom Ross, second Inkmoth Nexus is the land. He'll connect for a 1 with the Inkmoth he played on turn 1. There's the Tom Ross Infect counter. Gaieski is 1-time poisoned. But just colorless mana sources so far for Tom.
So I think Tom's looking to win on turn 4 this game, or his hand is just unbelievably bad and he's mulliganed, and I can't quite tell yet what is the case. If he has a fetch land as his other mana source, he wants to play that on turn 3, crack it tapped, and attacking for 1 with Inkmoth Nexus, so he takes the least amount of damage and has the most amount of time to cast that flurry of spells on turn 4 to win the game.
Blackleaf Cliffs, is the second land here for Gaieski. That'll bring back those Bloodghasts. Here's a Burning Inquiry. That actually might help Tom.
Yeah, if his hand is not good for mulligans, which it seems like when you start with Nexus, it's not great. This could help find green mana for him, but also it pumps his graveyard a bit for something like Become Immense on a future turn. This is really going to be about whether or not Gaieski can close this game out before Tom gets anything going, or find something like Fatal Push to really punish Tom should he go all in with a kind of a weaker starting holding.
Bad news for you. They're not rolling any dice, as Tom Ross will discard 3 green cards. Noble Hierarch, Glistener Elf finds a Vastwood. Gaieski loses, looks like a Lightning Bolt, Bloodstained Mire, and Flamewake Phoenix, though didn't really lose the Phoenix, but also chose not to bring it back as he has something better. Attacks for 4 with the hollow one and then casts Gurmag Angler. Tom Ross down to 16.
Yeah, with Tom Ross at 16 here, 9 damage from the big boys, 4 more is up to 13, 2 from the Flamewake Phoenix. That's going to send Tom all the way down to 1 at the very least with just what's right in front of him. A single Lightning Bolt could close the game.
We'll see just what Tom Ross can do from here. He's working with very little material going into this turn.
I mean, there is a world where Tom wins this turn, but it involves Mutagenic Growth, Become Immense, and a fetch land. If he's able to assemble that, it might even be 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah. Mutagenic Growth, Become Immense, fetch land is exactly enough.
Now, Tom Ross is rusty, but I think that if he had those cards, you'd have seen him execute that by now.
I think so, too. I think he's trying to figure out how to win the turn after. He can potentially play... Well, that 1 damage means that he's potentially facing lethal next turn if he does nothing. So we'll have to see what he's doing right now.
So there's Verdant Catacombs. He'll start there. Sacrifice that. Go find a breeding pool. He'll fall to 13. Blighted Agent is the play. So there's going to be no attacks here.
Yeah, but this is effectively just going to be a chump blocker. If he puts this in front of Gurmag Angler, that gives him a turn and a land drop. But this Fatal Push might just spell doom.
Yep, Fatal Push, bring back Flamewake Phoenix. This is an attack for 15. That's more than enough. We're going to game 2 here. And on the back table, looks like Abe Corrigan has already conceded the first game to Jody Keith. I can't imagine Jody actually beat him.
I mean, if you do something like Sorcerer Spyglass on, I think Sorcerer Spyglass works on mana abilities, right?
No, it doesn't. You name a card, but it shuts off.
Revoker names mana abilities. That's right.
Yes.
So there's some that do and some that don't. So I'm assuming he set up some sort of 2 or 3 or maybe 7 different cards that locked Abe Corrigan out of the game.
Right.
Because this deck is a bunch of random artifacts that come together to do something silly.
If you Spyglass, Pyrite Spellbomb, and Engineered Explosives.
Well, how do you stop Spina Visat from coming down?
Ooh, that I'm not sure.
Well, we can always take a look.
We'll figure that out later. Let's watch this.
Yeah,
match.
let's talk about this one.
All right, so Gaieski's up a game on Tom Ross's side for the Infect deck. His sideboard is 2 Nature's Claim, 2 Shaper's Sanctuary, a Ceremonious Rejection, a Dismember, a Dispel, a Dissenter's Deliverance, a Distortion Strike, a Grafdigger's Cage, a Nissa Voice of Zendikar, a Ravenous Trap, a Relic of Progenitus, a Spell Pierce, and a Spell Skite. What do you like from this myriad of one-ofs?
I like mild interaction. Dismember can buy you some time by taking away a Gurmag Angler or a Hollow One. Both of those are ways to trigger Flamewake Phoenix, which can slow the clock significantly, even at the cost of 4 life. I think Dissenter's Deliverance is good because not only can it bust up a Hollow One to buy you some time, but if your opponent just doesn't draw the Hollow One, you can cycle it, and it turns into something just as good. I don't love the Nature's Claims, don't love the Shaper's Sanctuary because there's not a ton of removal. Grafdigger's Cage only affects really Bloodghast and Flamewake Phoenix, so I'd probably leave that one out. Ravenous Trap is more of for all-in graveyard decks and not really for this one. Relic of Progenitus I think is pretty good. Spellskite probably pretty good as well to help stifle these lightning bolts.
All right. For Gaieski, he has a Fatal Push, 4 Thoughtseize, 4 Lay Down to the Void, 2 Engineered Explosives, 3 Grim Lavamancers, and a Terminate. So some options with spot removal and possibly Thoughtseize. What do you like from this mix?
Yeah, we've seen these Hollow One decks kind of do this weird transformational sideboard where they board out a lot of their kind of niche graveyard cards like the Bloodghast, like the Flamewake Phoenix, in favor of a bit more interaction, whether that's Terminate, Grim Lavamancer, Fatal Push, or what have you, even Thoughtseize on occasion, which we see all of those options here for Helm. I like Fatal Push in the matchup. I like Grim Lavamancer. Engineered Explosives is okay. Terminate's okay, but they're a little bit slow. Thoughtseize is the card that I'm really curious about, and it depends on how much Ethan wants to lower the overall synergy of his deck in favor of interacting with Tom. And my guess, he wants to interact with Tom as much as possible, so we could see upwards of 10 cards coming in, or 11 cards coming in this matchup. Basically everything except Ley Line of the Void.
Sure.
My guess, cutting Bloodghast, cutting Flamewake Phoenix, that's an easy 8. Those cards, while they do apply pressure, aren't really what this matchup is about, and he can really turn into a control deck if he so chooses.
Sure. Yeah, and once you're the control deck, the chip shots don't matter, especially with creatures that can't block.
Right, and something as powerful as Grim Lavamancer can single-handedly dominate a game. You just got to make sure that you don't randomly lose to the 2 spell skies that Tom has access to after sideboard, 1 main and 1 board.
Right. For those of you watching us at home, if you haven't already subscribed, you might consider subscribing to our Twitch page here at the ACG Tour. Subscription benefits. You, of course, can engage with Twitch chat here, and we're coming up on the elimination rounds. You get to vote. You decide the quarterfinals. Choose who we're going to watch as we go through the top 8 of the Team Modern Open here. Get your custom emoticons and badges. Todd has teased there's some new ones rolling around pretty soon here.
Yeah, we're doing some work on those. They're going to be coming out shortly, but not this week.
Someday. But, subscribe now. It's $4.99 a month. Get all those great features and enter the feature match area.
I honestly love choosing the top 8 match. It just makes me feel like I have so much power.
Right, you choose what everybody gets to see.
Right, and I always choose the worst one. Just to show them who's boss.
What are your criteria for what makes the worst? The most lopsided match?
As long as it's got Ironworks in it.
Ironworks versus Amulet is like a high priority for you?
No, that one's over fast.
Okay, so like a longer Ironworks matchup.
Like let's do Ironworks versus like Ensnaring Bridge or something. I don't know. Doesn't matter.
Try to get what's happening on the back table, the War of Invention deck.
Well, that game 1 was pretty fast. I don't know what happened.
I don't think it'll be that fast in untied grounds every time, but maybe.
I mean, maybe if Abe Corrigan's the one going off, but Jody Keith winning that game 1 in such a quick fashion is surprising.
I mean, he's honorary member of the Impact team, of course. So he wins fast.
Well, he also is a master of whatever deck he's playing. Jody puts in a ton of work learning these, I don't want to say weird archetypes, but these fringe strategies that really kind of pick apart the metagame in the right spots. He is known in Legacy for playing lands, which for the longest time was not mainstream. In most recent years, especially with the banning of Deathrite Shaman, lands has come back in a big way. And Jody right at the top of that curve because he's been playing it all along.
At the front table, Aaron Barich, also with a quick win over Luke Feeney, in fact, over Banned Spirits.
Yeah, we're less than 10 minutes into this match so far, and already 3 games have finished, 1 from each match. Happy to see all these players really keeping it crisp and clean and making it easy for us to watch instead of just sitting there and tanking the whole time. Kevin Jones. Just kidding. No, Kevin actually played super fast earlier when he was on camera.
Yeah, he put on a really good showing with Grixis Shadow.
Yeah, I love it. Really, was he playing a Jeskai or Blue or Azorius
Yeah,
Control?
He took down
was it the Jeskai
Purcell
Bros?
on the Jeskai. That's going to stick. I'm going to keep saying it. And even if no one else says it, at least I will be.
Well, the problem is that when you say Jeskai, it's really hard to actually hear you say Jeskai.
That's the best part.
Right. But if you saw it written, you'd be like, ah. But when you're saying it out loud, it just sounds like you're saying the word Jeskai with an S on the end.
Yes.
Apparently, Kevin Jones, the last time he was here in this building, he made the finals of the Modern Open and ended up losing to one Mr. Benjamin Nikolic, who was playing Jeskai Control today.
Weird that Nikolic was playing Jeskai Control.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, there is a trivia question about it that pops up on the scroll when we're between rounds, and I saw that. I'm just like, who comes up with these questions? We talk about it all the time. Are you even paying attention?
What did Ben Nikolic win a Modern Open with? Was it Jeskai?
It should have been Jeskai,
Azorius Splash Red. One spell snare, zero spell snares.
2 spell snares.
I don't know if he's ever registered
one
that
mana
one.
leak.
One negate.
Yeah. It's literally just all of the different lists. Which of these Jeskai 75s did Benjamin Nikolic win a Modern Open with?
0 Serum Visions, 2 Serum Visions, 4 Serum Visions.
Yeah. 1 Terminus. Yeah.
Tom Ross starting us off in Game 2. Breeding Pool down to 18. Here's Glistener Elf. Quite a bit better than that Turn 1 Inkmoth Nexus.
Yep. Tom's on the play here with it looks like a pretty good start. As far as I have heard, Gaieski is on 5 cards, but that has not deterred Hollow One before. We actually saw Gaieski earlier in the tournament mulligan to 5 and win pretty easily. Yeah.
That definitely can happen. You see he starts with Bloodstained Mire, and he'll Lightning Bolt down that Glistener Elf. See if he finds Blood Crypt or Mountain. It's going to be Blood Crypt, so he is at 17.
Tom here already has the secondary threat with the Inkmoth Nexus. That one is the worst of the bunch because it effectively requires you to spend 2 mana to get things started, 1 to activate, and itself attacking. But it is very, very strong in the deck because it has flying.
On turn 2 for Gaieski, here is a Thoughtseize. Looks like at least some of them have come in off the sideboard. We'll get a look at Ross's hand.
Yeah, my guess, Become Immense is going away. It is the most expensive of these, but there's no real threat of a win next turn. Probably going to be an attack for 5. My guess, playing Inkmoth Nexus, casting a Might of Old Crozier and attacking for 5.
So the holdings are that Become Immense you mentioned. There's a second Inkmoth Nexus, a Dryad Arbor, a Might of Old Crosa, and a Vines of Vastwood. So good selection of pump spells here.
Yeah, Tom has this one of Dryad Arbor that a lot of times you'll side out in matchups where you're not ever trying to do normal damage to the opponent. In this specific instance, I think he's leaving it in the deck because he can fetch up a blocker for something like Gurmag Angler to buy him a full turn. In this scenario, naturally drawing it, though, not so good.
Yeah, a little bit worse than a forest. A lot worse than a spell. Vines of Vastwood is the take for Gaieski. Possibly some additional spot removal spells in the hand. Maybe a Fatal Push that's a little more agnostic about the Become Immense.
No, for sure. This Grimlawmancer is pretty good normally. The thing about Inkmoth Nexus, though, is that you never have to expose your creature to the removal spell until you're ready to go for it and you're ready to protect it. So it'll the pressure will be on Gaieski to actually assemble some other piece of pressure to really force Tom's hand. Otherwise, I think Tom's just going to be content just hitting some land drops, and then at some point just going to turn the corner, activate Inkmoth Nexus, and try to win a fight over this one big attack.
Yeah, he can make some more land drops, insulate a bit against the Lavamancer. The Dryad Arbor, not very helpful on that front, though.
Oh, absolutely not. My guess, Tom here just going to whack for 5. Ooh, just 2.
All right, that's interesting. Yeah, so he plays the second Inkmoth, fires up the first, and there's Noble Hierarch. 2 Infect coming across. Maybe trying to run the Grim Lavamancer out of food. I will say that every time that Gaieski activates his Lavamancer, that makes it a little bit harder for him to commit a Gurmag Angler, a Tassiger, those delve threats that become more difficult to cast.
Absolutely. And there's a chance with bringing in 3 copies of Grim Lavamancer that Gaieski recognizes that strain on your graveyard and maybe has sided out Gurmag Angler because it is a little bit slow compared to some of the other threats that you can be attacking with.
Yeah, he did have a lot of cards to bring in, so plenty of options as far as how he wanted to configure it.
Yep. If I'm Gaieski, you have to look at this battlefield and you have to hope that Tom either makes a mistake or that your hand, the last 2 cards in your hand, are completely stacked. My guess is that Tom is going to go for the kill this turn if he has 2 things wrapped up. But if he only has 1 thing wrapped up, he'll just play patient, maybe just attack for 2, see where Gaieski goes with this, and then try to win on the following turn.
Yeah, so there's that Dryad Arbor. Ross will use 1 Inkmoth to fire up the other. Here's an attack with Exalted. Actions on Gaieski. 3 mana for him now, as Blackcleave Clips was his play for turn. 4 cards in the graveyard, so he can fire up the Lavamancer, though just 2 cards in hand. This is a troublesome spot.
Yeah, in this instance, I think that Gaieski is doing this at the end, basically after damage, or maybe it's not even end of turn, but this is definitely after infect damage.
Yep, 2 came across. Gaieski's up to 4 poison, and he will use the Lavamancer.
I'm not entirely sure. There's a lot of verbal communication going back and forth between these 2 players.
It's true.
All right, we have confirmation. There are 4 poison counters. This is, my guess is still during combat, but after damage. So he's going to take the 2 infect and then activate Grim Lavamancer, so he's never under a threat of dying because combat has already happened. And this is a trick that as a mid-range player or a tempo player, you do this to make sure that you don't get destroyed by a pump spell in response to your burn-based removal spell. And in this scenario, that's what he does. Takes the 2 because you need 10 for it to matter. Otherwise, the other 9 don't matter at all. This Grim Lavamancer does trade that 2 cards in the graveyard for a Might of Volcroja.
Yeah, so on Gaieski's turn, after all that, played another Thoughtseize, took away that Become Immense. Groundswell was the last card in hand as we go back to Tom Ross. Taps Hierarch, Breeding Pool, fires up both Inkmoths. Is going to attack with both of those and the Dryad Arbor. Interesting attack.
I think he's trying to get him. I think he drew mutagenic growth.
Yeah, so here's Grim Lavamancer at 1 of the Inkmoths. There's mutagenic growth. Ross falls to 16.
Yeah, that's only 4 infect, but it completely invalidates the entire turn from Gaieski and puts him to 8 infect. And
that's 2 more cards out of Gaieski's graveyard, just 1 left over.
Right. Looks like he does have access to a Fatal Push, which he can use here to take care of the Inkmoth Nexus. The last card in Tom's hand, I believe, is just a Groundswell, which, while tapped out, doesn't do much of anything.
Yeah, that one's faced up for both players. Tom Ross can be a tough player to get a read on. That Dryad Arbor attack is really curious.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, though, Gaieski is going down to 11 here, and if this Grim Lavamancer kind of churns through all of these infect threats, you want him to be at a pretty low life total. With all these Thoughtseizes and such, it makes a lot of sense.
Fatal Push does take down the 3/3 Inkmoth. Gaieski goes up to 5 poison, and he'll start his turn with a Goblin Lore. A lot more juice for that Grim Lavamancer off this one.
Yeah, he's going to be discarding 3, keeping 2, one of which might be a hollow one, which he had in hand before he cast the Goblin Lore.
It's like Burning Inquiry and 2 lands.
Yeah, here comes hollow one down, and he still has an activation of Grim Lavamancer. So Gaieski firmly in the driver's seat in this game, but it can change any moment with a good draw from Tom.
Yeah, last card in hand for Gaieski, I believe, was Flame Blade Adept. That one's kind of whatever.
Yeah, he only has 1 mana up, so this Grim Lavamancer is only threatening to do 2 damage. If Tom has a second +2/+2 spell here, he can go activate the Inkmoth Nexus, attack for 2. Shaper Sanctuary. Let's get that Shaper Sanctuary up on screen. I want to talk about that one. This is a card that is relatively new to the Infect archetype. It's an enchantment for 1 mana that allows you to protect your creatures from forms of spot removal. It's normally pretty good when your opponent is playing something like Jund, and they have a bunch of Fatal Pushes, things like that. We'll see how it works out here for Tom.
Yeah, mostly for the heavy interactive spells. When a creature you control is the target of a spell or ability, so it will check Grim Lavamancer, you draw a card.
Right.
I suppose you may, but
yeah,
the idea is that you do.
Yeah, you should. The idea is you should.
Right.
So here he's kind of baiting. He could actually cast this Groundswell if he likes to threaten 3, and then kind of force Gaieski to use the Grim Lavamancer. It would draw him a card, but he would end up losing his last Infect creature, though.
Yeah, so he fires up the Inkmoth Nexus. That'll exalt up to 2, and Gaieski will go up to 7 poison. Thinking about whether he wants to use that Grim Lavamancer end stepped. Maybe from 16, I don't know how much he's thinking about going upstairs, but it becomes more inviting with that Sanctuary on the battlefield.
Yeah, I think he's just going to try to grind through the Sanctuary and hope for the best. He's going to target the Inkmoth. Tom's going to draw a card, and then he's going to probably use the Groundswell to protect it.
Gaieski landed on going upstairs. Ross to 14.
This is going to get good.
Here comes Hollow One. Tom Ross down to 10.
Seven poison, though. Just the Exalted from Noble Hierarch is not quite enough. Needs 1 more point of pump. Let's see if he can navigate past this Grim Lavamancer.
Flame Blade Adept added to the battlefield for Gaieski. Back over to Tom Ross. He's been hanging on to that Groundswell that both players know about. It would be pretty safe to shove here if he had a second pump spell to go with it. As you mentioned, just exalting off Noble Hierarch, not quite lethal. You want to weigh how likely he is to just lose on the crackback. He'll use his Breeding Pool to fire up his Inkmoth Nexus. We'll see where he goes from here.
Well, if last turn's any indication, Gaieski's only reason to interact with Inkmoth Nexus at this stage is if it's lethal. If I'm Tom, I say, you know what? I don't think that you have a 1 mana piece of interaction. I'm going to play my +2/+2. You're going to use Lavamancer, and I'm going to play another +2/+2 and kill you.
Yeah, so the Inkmoth Nexus, it is attacking. Gaieski thinking about what he wants to do here.
Odds are very low that Tom actually dies next turn. If he goes for both pump spells and Gaieski's last card is either a Bolt or a Fatal Push, and then he peels something like Faithless Looting, Burning Inquiry, or Goblin Lore, that does threaten lethal. But I think if you're Tom, you need to just go for it because this Grim Lavamancer is going to just start chunking you along with that Hollow One.
He did leave back Dryad Arbor and Noble Hierarch. Might be planning on using them as blockers. That could amount to something. And yeah, he just decides to knock Gaieski up to 9 poison.
Yeah, and this is basically just, you know, you're going to use that Lavamancer, you're going to send me to 8. Next turn, I can attack with the Inkmoth Nexus and force you to act first. And as an Infect pilot, your goal is always to make your opponent play their thing first, if you can help it. If they do play their thing first, you usually will win because you just are basically taking initiative from them. But if Tom starts the fight and Gaieski just has 1 more piece of interaction, Tom ends up losing the fight and usually losing the war.
Right. Yeah, it becomes a big issue who moves first when both decks are on 1 mana interaction.
Right.
You can shove a little bit more against decks like Jeskai where it's 2, 3, and 4. But Hollow One, it's Lightning Bolts, Fatal Pushes, Grim Lavamancer activations, and what you're saying, who flinches first, they really can get punished in a lot of the games.
Yep. And in this specific scenario, you know, Tom is playing very conservatively because The Inkmoth Nexus is virtually his only route to victory at this point. Losing that Becomaments early means it's going to be really hard for him to win with normal damage with that Dryad Arbor or the Noble Hierarch. He's 1 point shy right now.
So Gaieski will fire up the Lavamancer. This time he is targeting the Inkmoth Nexus. Ross will draw a card off the Shaper's Sanctuary and see if he wants to defend. It would require him to tap one of these blockers. Those are his 2 mana sources currently, the Hierarch and the Arbor. He will use the Hierarch to groundswell the Nexus, so that'll save that. And we're back on Gaieski's turn.
Now, this is maybe a heads-up play here from Gaieski. Targeting the Inkmoth encourages Tom to tap something like the Noble Hierarch. And now, if he drew the nuts, he could actually use the Grim Lavamancer to target the Dryad Arbor, and he would either die or be forced to tap himself for mana to protect, which would eliminate it from combat anyway. Unfortunately for him, I don't think he drew it, and now the door might be closing.
Here's an attack by Hollow One and Flameblade Adept. The Arbor can't jump in front of the smaller creature, though that's not really a concern. Ross will put Dryad Arbor in front of Hollow One. Ooh, and then he's going to become immense the Dryad Arbor as a blocker.
Yeah, I like this play. It takes away a lot of the pressure that Gaieski is going to be dealing over the next few turns, or forces Gaieski to have a removal spell in hand right now, or to use the Lavamancer right now, all of which is desirable because Tom is just going to attack with Nexus and then play that 1 pump spell.
I like it when the Infect deck plays pump spells as a removal.
Yeah. It's usually a sign that you're losing the game, but in this very specific instance, you're kind of strangling the options that your opponent has.
Yeah, and Gaieski's going to let it go. Hollow One dies in combat. Tom Ross will be falling to 9, and Gaieski will follow up with Thoughtseize.
That is a huge Punisher here. Tom is actually short against just the Grim Lavamancer. He's going to need something off the draw step or the Shaper Sanctuary trigger right now.
Yeah, Blossoming Defense did hit the bin there. What can Tom Ross do? Against an opponent on 9 poison, he needs something to get through this Grim Lavamancer. He'll fire up Inkmoth Nexus. Here's an attack. Gaieski will activate the Grim Lavamancer. The Shaper Sanctuary will draw Tom a card. Can he defend?
I don't think he drew it. I think he drew something. Oh, maybe. I'm wrong.
It's like mutagenic growth?
I'm wrong.
All right. Growth on the Inkmoth. Do you have it? No. We're going to game 3. Tom Ross ties things up against Ethan Gaieski.
Yeah, it looks like we're tied up across the board with Abe Corrigan taking down game 2 in that matchup. And then Aaron Barich versus Luke Feeney, 1-1. That Infect versus Bant Spears matchup, very tough to navigate sometimes from the Infect side of things. Very tricky from both sides with a lot of instant speed interaction.
Yeah, the Bant Spirits deck, you have a lot of blockers. Path to Exile doesn't care about most of your pump spells. And Luke Feeney's on a full 4 Reflector Mage. That card can be really obnoxious for Infect.
Oh, absolutely. And it also gives you a big boost to the power level of Phantasmal Image. And that combination of cards ends up making Collect a Company a little bit better because the diversity of threats you can hit and the effects you can get just increases dramatically.
Gaieski will be on the play as we go to the decider here. All right, so getting a look at what has been shaking out here in round 15. So tables 1, 2, and 3 they all drew. So Benson, Montekia, Cowden, Ayers, Magales, Dilks, they ID'd. They'll be in. Turnbull, Whitehouse, Keeney, Belden, Patel, Harvey, another ID. Nixon, Stewart, Lutz, Bass, Vermillion, Mann. That's going to be the last table to ID. And then we have win and ins. We're watching this one here where it is clean for Corrigan, Gaieski, Feeney. Keith, Ross, and Barich might need a little bit of help off of tiebreakers if they win. And then on table 4, we have Metz, Susko, McCammon against Jessup, Ingram, Scarin as a clean win and in.
Yep. Bunch of really great players here, all fighting for their top 8 berth. Let's see who takes it down here for game 3. Tom Ross on Infect. Welcome back.
Right? It's been too long.
Yeah, we saw him at the Invitational. That was one of his first events back. He played the Open in Las Vegas at the end of last year. Just really awesome to see him coming back and immediately threatening a top 8 right when he gets back, you know.
Yeah, he did play a team open previously since he's been back from working at Wizards of the Coast. Aaron Barich did team with him there, and you mentioned that, Tom, he did have to shake some rest off. He'd been working over Wizards of the Coast, obviously playing Magic, but probably not as much Modern, definitely not Tournament Magic. But
yeah, you're playing with theoretical cards that are always changing and always being tweaked.
You hear some tales from the pit about games actually, cards just changing in the middle of a game.
Yeah.
It's just nonsense.
I'm pretty sure this should have one more toughness.
Yeah.
Like, that changes this removal spell that I've been holding. What? Come on, man.
We're not playing to win. We're just trying to figure it out. But my creature has 4 toughness now.
Yeah. Also want to point out that while Tom Ross just finished his stint under the play design team at Wizards of the Coast, our own JD Complarens just accepted an offer to be working up there in Seattle.
Yeah, just made the road trip, just got moved in this week. Congratulations to JD, and definitely very deserving. We will miss her content on StarCityGames.com.
Absolutely. It was fantastic.
Very valued asset to the premium side there. I really hope that we get some JD content from the development of Magic sets.
Oh, yeah, that would be really cool. One of my favorite article series over the last 15, 20 years or whatever has been the Future League articles that various design professionals create, and just seeing a lot of those minds develop these cards for us to play with has always been very interesting to me.
I like the notes from the design files.
Yes.
My favorite of all time is Sensei's Divining Top. It has the note, this is one of those bad cards that players love.
Nice.
Those are both wrong.
Yeah.
It is a great card, and I hate it.
Yeah, well, the people who like it really like it.
That's true.
So, there were 50-50.
Yeah. I suppose if you really iron it out. Both players going to 6 here for the decider. We see some mulligans and some scrying.
I think that definitely favors the Hollow 1 player. We saw last game, Gaieski on 5 cards, still able to put up a heck of a fight against Tom Ross and almost took it down with Ross drawing the card he needed just at the last moment.
Gaieski will start with Wooded Foothills into Blood Crypt. He's at 17. He will cast a Flameblade Adept. Tom Ross did squire to the top. We'll see what he can produce on his first turn.
Yeah, Noble Hierarch or something like Glistener Elf or even a Shaper Sanctuary here, all good starts for him. Though in the face of this Flameblade Adept, perhaps a draw that is too slow without a 1-drop.
Just a Pendelhaven to start things out, though Gaieski does not have a pre-combat spell, so just 1 for Flameblade Adept, so Tom Ross is at 19, but he will cast a second Flameblade Adept. Tom Ross at the ready. Dismember takes that down. He'll fall to 15.
Yeah, that could be kind of a slower play from Gaieski here, just looking to get 2 copies of Flameblade Adept onto the battlefield before going ham, if you will, with some Burning Inquiries and or Goblin Lores or Faithless Lootings.
No second land for Tom. And we're back to Gaieski.
It's really interesting. Tom is on a Mold of 6, and he was on the draw with the Scry, so a 1-lander, not all that bad. Tom does have access to a second Dismember in hand, if I'm not mistaken, so he has things to do. I think he just wants to save it for something like a Grim Lavamancer. Only played the first one because he wanted to make sure that he got use out of it and was able to be at a high enough life total to get that use out of it.
Yeah, at least wait for the Adept to get bigger anyway, but it just knocked Tom down to 14. Tom again misses the second land. Gaieski again attacks for 1. Tom to 13, but Gaieski hanging out in 2 lands, Ross on 1.
This is a very anemic battle, but I think it's one that definitely favors Gaieski. Tom, it's going to be very difficult for him to deploy a threat and protect it, whereas Gaieski can use mana end of turn to play something like Lightning Bolt or Terminate or Fatal Push, and then untap and do it again and kind of overload Tom's mana resources.
Yeah, and Ross, you can't just do nothing for this long, especially against a Lightning Bolt deck. They're obviously mostly there in this matchup to deal with creatures, but at some point they just go upstairs, the end of the game. And Gaieski's just firing off 2 Lightning Bolts here.
Yeah, I think he sees that if he's able to peel something like Looting or even Goblin Lore or Burning Inquiry, there's a chance he ends up just winning the game, especially because he has a Bloodghast in hand to discard. Doesn't find it, just finds a 3rd land, but has a removal spell to go along with it.
So Tom Ross did fall to 7 and discarded Blighted Agent for turn. Here comes the Flame Blade Adept again. Ooh, and Tom will use that Dismember, falling to 3.
Now, if he had used it earlier, he would be at 5 out of burn range. I'm actually pretty surprised here that Gaieski didn't play this Bloodghast pre-combat. Holding on to, I guess because he's playing Tasker. Never mind, that makes way more sense.
Yeah, Bloodstained Mire and Tasker is the play there. Ross now facing down a lethal threat. Here's a Glistener Elf that could block if Gaieski did not have Terminate, and Ethan Gaieski is going to win this one 2-1 over the boss.
Yeah, a really frustrating draw there from Tom Ross's Infect deck, not supplying him with a second land. He was never able to gain any real traction. Gaieski's draw was anemic as well, but strong enough to get the job done. And Gaieski and Hollow One take it down 2-1. We'll see who takes it down in the other 2 matches.
Yeah, so we'll be going down to Jody Keith versus Abe Corrigan, War Prison versus Ironworks in just a second. That was the match that had a really quick Game 1 result. Jody Keith was able to lock out Abe Corrigan with whatever the War deck does. I'm not really sure yet.
The list is in front of me, and honestly, I can't for the life of me figure out how it wins the game.
Casting Mishra's Bauble?
What? How?
Casting Witchbane Orb? The main deck Damping Sphere?
No, but how do you physically win the game?
Your opponent concedes.
Okay, seriously, look at the list.
Okay.
Tell me how they win. I see.
You missed Ipnu Rivulet.
That's it? That's the one?
It's the only desert.
How does he get it back? Oh, does he have a 1-0
There's a Crucible of Worlds.
It's
too easy. It is trivial for this deck to close games. Let's go check it out, see what Jody Keith's up to against Abe Corrigan.
Great.
Doesn't this look fun? Let's get right down into the quote-unquote action.
Both players playing hard here, have a lot of permanents on the battlefield.
So we got some Sorceress Spyglass action here. There's an Ensnaring Bridge. We'll figure out exactly what's shut off here. Corrigan does have a Psy Master Thopterus going, a bunch of Thopters.
Yeah, and while Jody does have an Ensnaring Bridge, he really needs to get that last card out of his hand in order to make sure that these Thopters can't attack through the bridge. All right, there's currently, there it is. Currently in explosions for X=2 on the stack. Mishra's Bauble being used to save Fire Extinguisher Revoker, I believe.
Yeah, Welding Jar saved that one. The Sorceress Spyglass was naming Psy Master Thopterus. Phyrexian Revoker actually an important part of the package against Ironworks because that one does shut off the mana ability of Krark Clan Ironworks, whereas the other similar flex can't do that.
Yeah, in this very specific scenario, though, it is naming Psy Master Thopterus because that can generate a bunch of extra cards, though it looks like Jody is pretty far behind. If he can't get this last card out of his hand, he might just lose to the natural combo of Krark Clan Ironworks, let alone all these Thopters.
I mean, yeah, you got to get that hand empty. There's not that many cards that Jody could have left over that he can't cast. It's, Ensnaring Bridges, things like if he has another Word Invention. But there's very few cards that are very expensive. Deck full of Mishra's Baubles, Mox Opals, what have you.
Yeah, this matchup does not seem particularly bad for Ironworks. I just think that it takes a long time to fight through everything because Jody's deck is incredibly resilient, has a lot of tutor-type effects, and if it assembles enough of these mini lock pieces, it could just take a while to be able to find the answer. Perhaps not as difficult as a deck like Lantern Control, but nonetheless still pretty annoying if kind of scary at points.
Right. And because of that Scrap Trawler, Corrigan should be able to fight through everything. He should be able to get that bridge off the table. He'd have to sacrifice his Psy and his Trawler to do that, but once he gets enough Thopters, then he can just close the game fairly easily.
Yeah, he does seemingly have an Ironworks in hand, but...
right, and looks like Jody Keith has seen enough. I got to figure that Luke Feeney did win the match against Aaron Barich, so looks... Oh, hold on. We got a weird update here. I think that Jody conceded this game, so I think we're looking at Feeney versus Barich. Is that where we're at?
Yeah, because Jody lost that game, so I I think we just messed it up. I'm pretty sure that Abe Corrigan won that game.
All
and we should be done with the match, if I'm not mistaken. And now Abe Corrigan, Ethan Gaieski, and Luke Feeney have a pretty great shot at getting into the top 8 elimination rounds. Their tiebreakers are pretty good, but might not be good enough. We'll have to wait and see for the final results.
Yeah, so Corrigan, Gaieski, Feeney, congratulations to them. And we're going to check out a little bit more Magic. We're going to do our time-shifted match.
Now I got you doing it. You had to think about it.
You got in my head, man.
I'm sorry.
You got in my head.
See, I get in my own head. That's my problem.
Yeah, that'll happen.
Now I'm living rent-free inside Ryan Arbitur's brain.
I mean, rent is very cheap in this brain of mine.
All right, well, we will be bringing you the first 2 time-shifted games of that match, but first we got to pay the bills. Roll that beautiful beam footage.